we've called today's session time to restart, and we use that word carefully because restart implies ripping it all up and starting again. And Mark's sharing our screen now, which is really helpful. So restart is basically inspired by the fact that we know that many of you are needing to look again fundamentally at your organisation and at what you're all about and what you're trying to achieve. Because the crisis, even if the crisis isn't providing a huge cratering of your income, it's changing very, very quickly the nature of the social landscape, and that's just beginning because we're about to see a lot of unemployment. We're about to see very large changes, we think, in the social settlement. So, just to give an example of what I've put on this slide, this is no rainy day. This is a tsunami, folks. I'm afraid, and we have to treat this as not an interruption to business as usual. I think there is no business as usual to go back to. This is no rainy day. We're going to see incomes drop in some organisations, not all. Some of you will grow, but we're seeing incomes drop for many organisations between 30 and 50% this year. In the wider economy, we're expecting a GDP drop of about 13%, at least. That's nearly an eighth of the economy gone this year. With all that implies for jobs, for public finances, and so on. The third sector, the charities particularly, are anticipating a drop in income of up to half, and 48 billion being at risk to charities. Again, some of your public sector facing organisations are not going to feel that, but charities are in deep trouble at the moment. We're in a severe recession at the moment. We're seeing GDP drop 35% this quarter. Now the other quarters will make up for that, but that will make for a net GDP drop of around 13 to 15%. We think that's from every economist I've managed to read and talk to, including the chief economist of the Bank of England. So there we have it. We're in uncharted territory. To give you an idea of what that looks like, the last recession was 6% drop in GDP. 6%, and we're looking at twice to three times that in this period coming up. What that means, folks, is that we're going to see real harm to the social fabric in the next 3 to 5 years. If you read your Michael Marmot and other social sociologists and social scientists, what that will tell you is that unemployment is going to be a big factor. Unemployment has some very, very damaging effects on society, on social cohesion, on children, on the vulnerable, and on the social connectedness of the society. It's really, really damaging. We're going to see massive harm to our social fabric, and our social organisations are going to be facing right into that. So, although it's not apparent now because we are early in the day, we are going to be facing into some very, very powerful factors. Now, those of you as old as me can remember the 1980s. The 1980s were a very difficult time in many parts of the country. I think it's around that level, if not worse, in terms of social damage that we're potentially looking at, albeit with a more socially minded government perhaps this time than we had then. Those of you that rely on charitable income, this rescue package of £1 billion from the government isn't going to touch the sides. Charities are already 4 billion down. This is a bridging 25% of that. And that's just immediate. That's just in this quarter. Forget the rest of the year. So the rescue package isn't going to touch the sides. Trusts and foundations that give charities money rely on investment income. Now, anyone who's got a pension knows that their pension's between 20 and 30% down. It's the same for trusts and foundations. They are that amount down. So although they're bringing forward money now, the amount of money they're going to have to spend in the coming years is down. The lottery are down. They're very, very down. Again, they're bringing forward money now. Next year, their pots will be smaller, probably, unless the government does more, which we're not particularly expecting. Corporates are doing more on many levels, but they'll just have less spare cash. British companies sit on a lot of cash, but a lot of cash is being burnt at the moment to get through this economic standstill that we're in. So we think corporates will be less sparing of cash in the next year. And finally, public sector facing organisations, which many of you are, I think will if you're in a sector that is complementing the government's priorities, which are basically going to be health, education, and law and order, because law and order will become a factor as this progresses, we will be probably in a better position than those of you that are outside that trinity. So if you're working with youth at risk, or you're working in any of the other areas outside health, education, and law, and law enforcement, I think it's going to be much tougher for you in the coming years, because although there is a wide spread expectation that the public finances will be kept at a certain level, and austerity won't be reimposed, because there isn't much to go at anymore, frankly, there will still be a huge downward pressure on spending, because the government will be looking where possible to not spend money as it is doing now. So that is a pretty difficult prospect when you add it all together, which is why I'm trying to just get you forward in your mind a year or so hence, and start thinking what we're facing into, both in society and as a consequence in our organisations. So that's the context. That's the strategic context that we think we're looking at now. So I'm just going to hand over to Craig, who's going to Craig Morley, my social minds colleague, who's going to talk about kind of what in the very short term you need to be doing, and also kind of, and we know that some of you are doing this stuff now, but we've come up with a top 10 of things which we think you need to be doing now, and or at least most of you probably need to be doing now, or a mix of those. So without further ado, Craig, could you just come in at this point? Craig Morley, thank you.
Sure, thank you. So to respond effectively to the context that Craig just laid out there, we believe that all organisations should now be planning for a scenario of taking out up to 50% of their total costs by the end of this year. And obviously that sounds very scary prospect, but we believe that by planning for that now, it maximises the chance of survival and then thriving beyond. So in the restart paper that will be shared later today, in fact soon after this call, we've laid out 10 steps that we think all of you should consider right now that can help achieve that scenario. And as Craig said, many of you will be doing some of those steps already, and the exact mix will be according to your organisation situation. But we think most of those steps are relevant to most organisations. So we've grouped those 10 steps into 3 themes: deepening partnerships, accelerating the use of technology, and supporting people. So taking the first one, there are over 200,000 charities in England and Wales at the moment. In London alone, there are more than 200 charities that support homeless issues. Now, many of us have been talking for a long time that the charity sector, the non-profit sector, is very fragmented and there's a lot of duplication. We believe now is the time to really address that, and to be looking again at how you can partner, to collaborate deeply in terms of sharing assets and operations with other like-minded organisations in order to deliver our missions as effectively as possible. And that might need to go as far as consolidation and merger. And as we go through that process, it's important to be very focused on what are our own core strengths and assets and competitive advantages. So we're really playing to our individual strengths as organisations as we go into these more partnership arrangements. So there's some really good examples in the current crisis of that. So the Oak National Academy, a number of academy chains and schools have come together to create an online education platform for children. A number of social club members are doing similar around online tutoring to talk to the government about an overall offer that can help reach the most vulnerable children at this time. So partnership, we think, is incredibly important. The second theme is around accelerating technology. And we think this is really about turning a necessity, what's been an absolute necessity, into a virtue. And we think that accelerating technology applies as much to the back office and streamlining that area as it does to service delivery. So an example of digitizing service delivery, a number of GPs, but before this crisis, the proportion of GPs who used telephone or video calls for initial consultations was very small. Now virtually all consultations are done that way, and talking to primary care providers, they're planning to keep it that way. And that's because it's much more efficient for them, but also for many patients. It can take out costs, it can improve employee and customer satisfaction. In terms of streamlining the back office, an example here might be Raspberry Pi Foundation, who over the last couple of years have done away with a myriad of manual, paper-based, labour-intensive back office processes and have used online apps and tools to really automate everything from recruitment, document signing, payment processing, expenses. And most of these apps and tools are free for charities. And they now have a very small team who support a global operation using these suite of online tools. And we think that's something that every organisation should be considering right now. And finally, in terms of staying virtual, so we would ask that, are you really considering going back to the previous status quo, or do you think that actually many of your staff prefer the flexibility of some home working? Is there an opportunity here to take out rent and rate costs and have a smaller office which you can use more flexibly whilst reducing costs and improving employee satisfaction? Rent and rates typically about 5% of the total cost base, so there's a big opportunity there. So that's about accelerating technology. And finally, as we go through all of these changes, of course, it's absolutely vital and paramount to support our people. I don't know about you, but I found during this process that it's felt like we've had to move away from a more focus on inputs and task management and control to much more trust and focus on outcomes. And I think as we continue with that perhaps there's opportunities here for people to be freed up from supervisory, managerial, middle management roles and redeployed more to the front line, which is more empowering for them. One of the social club members, Bevan Healthcare, has done that, and as it's done it, it's made sure that it's invested heavily in support for its staff through counselling and coaching services to make sure they feel equipped for this different culture. Now, as we go through this process, inevitably there are going to be some really tough calls to make on talent, and it's important that you have your very strongest team, both executive team and non-executive team, going into the future. And wherever, of course, some difficult calls need to be made and people need to leave the organisation, it's a mark of real leadership at this time to give them every support that's possible. So we believe that the collection of these interventions can make a big difference to making your organisation as efficient and lean as possible going into the future, and that will give you the space to reorient your strategy if need be. And Mark is now going to talk more about that.
Thanks, Craig. So through that, you've bought yourself some runway to survive the next few months, and now I want to turn to the issue of the long term. And I'd like to suggest that we can view this aspect of restart really as a one-off opportunity to radically adapt our organisations for the new era. Half the income for many charities shouldn't necessarily mean half the impact, and the huge changing landscape for those in other sectors, again, it doesn't need to reduce the impact that we make to the social communities we serve, but only if we are prepared to go back and look at the fundamentals of the difference we exist to make. So here are 6 questions we want to invite you to consider, and I'll whip through them quite quickly and we'll have a chance to discuss them later. So first, let's start with our end game. What are the new specific outcomes in our communities of need that we want to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years? Looking within Social Club, take East Coast Community Healthcare as an example, who are repositioning themselves, widening their end game to take greater accountability for the public health outcomes within their whole community. This radically changes who they are and how they operate as an organisation, but it is driven at the outset by the social outcomes they want to see. In a time of increased commercial pressures, maintaining a really clear, sharp focus on the social end game is vital for our success as social organisations. Second, does your core service or methodology need to change? This crisis has closed some doors and opened others, creating fundamentally new services. Consider Persona, who's a fantastic social care organisation or KIC up in Manchester. Their daycare services have been hugely hit by this, forcing them to radically rethink the fundamentals of what daycare service is about, what it means and how they deliver it to their customers. In education, Action Tutoring are moving their entire service to help disadvantaged pupils online. Again, causing them to focus on what is most important and most impactful. What have we learned about what is truly valuable to our customers or our users at this time? And how will you change your service to reflect that? Not just in the short term, but for the long term also. Third, what strategies can you deploy to get ahead? So much is shifting right now, and many of you will have taken new ground in this time, particularly those working with health, filling previously untapped voids. Several organisations within Social Club, such as Catalyst or Bromley Healthcare, have taken this as an opportunity to accelerate the move into discharge, freeing up space at a pace never seen before. But this has required them to act quickly, see and seize an opportunity, step up, proving themselves to be a really valuable partner, which will serve them really well in the long term. But what strategic opportunities exist for you to stake your claim? Question 4, operating in a new era requires new skills and new partnerships. Take Tempo Time Credits. As it prepares to scale to meet the surge in volunteering across the country, it's bringing in greater skills in marketing and digital to be able to adapt to that. Whilst Lacala in Yorkshire is looking to increase its community focus by extending its reach into the system, building new partnerships, formal and informal, with other key players in the health and care sectors to really establish itself and firm its footprint in there and equip it for what it needs to do. 5, so under this, then what kind of organisation do we need to become? What's the culture, the governance, the ways of working that will make us more agile and more effective? It's imperative that our organisations change, culturally and operationally, to adapt to the new services that we provide. So, for example, this is a question that Peter Griggs, great new CEO at Homestart UK, which is a federation of over 200 family sport charities, is asking. He is seeking to add greater value to his members. So he's asking the big questions about Homestart can best serve its community with a tough fundraising climate ahead for everyone. It will need to be smaller, more agile, more effective where it counts, driving a whole new relationship, completely changing the dynamic of the whole organisation. And lastly, as we navigate this, how do we know if Restart is working? And it's a really important question. There's going to be lots of testing and learning within this, and we need markers and checks in place to keep us on course, to make sure that there's feedback loops that we understand, we test, we learn, we adapt into the new surroundings as we go. So those are the 6 questions we invite you to consider as you approach your own restart and take this opportunity to radically adapt your organisation for the post-COVID reality. Thank you, Craig. Craig, you might be on mute.
Okay, I'm back. Okay. Don't bowl alone. We're nearly there, guys. Don't bowl alone is our message here. Can I, Mark, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
That's good. Okay. We're nearly there. We've got 3. Being a chief exec at the moment, particularly, is an extremely tough gig. And we think there are 3 important things that you all need to do to ensure that you're at your maximum in terms of ability to respond. First of all, you need your community. Can we do the slide, Mark? I can't see the slide. Thank you. So you need your community. We've got 100+ leaders in the club network. You're a resource to each other. You're here to inspire, to energize, and to advise each other. The way we set up the club is that it's super easy for you all to connect in settings like this, but also offline. It's all of your contact details are behind a secure wall, which you can all access. And we urge you to use your community now as never before to get the necessary support that you need at this time. Secondly, you need partnership. You need and you need insight. I'll talk about insight first. At the moment, it's really, really important to understand your environment and to understand what's really going on out there. Getting your head above your immediate environment, your own organization is as never before absolutely paramount. It's an absolutely critical thing to do at the current time, because the world is changing extremely quickly, and if you're not sighted on that, then your risks go right up. So I think getting the insight you need. Now, we're doing everything we can in the club to bring you as much insight as we can from a range of sources, and you've seen that through the webinars, and that will continue for the rest of the year. But go beyond your usual places as well. Try and get as much insight as you can into what's truly going on out there, because it's just so fast moving. And the final thing I want to say, and this touches on what we're here to talk about today, is partnership. At Social Minds, we've been working with many of you as advisors for a long time, and we want to continue that. But we've had to do some fairly hard thinking ourselves about what an impactful advisory offer looks like in this climate, and we've come to the conclusion that I think a lot of what we were doing before was helpful in a different era, but probably of not first order priority now. And we think that what will be of most help to organisations going forward, this is our hunch, is that help on the big questions, such as how we get through this year and how we reinvent ourselves for the future in the ways that Mark and Craig described, is probably the most useful thing we can do as an organisation going forward. And what we've just done now, in a way, is just illustrate, I think, what we're wholly and exclusively focusing on now, with not only with our members, but also with other organisations we're talking to. So we're really kind of almost relaunching ourselves today, and in sharing what we are, and we want to make you aware of that, and we want to have conversations with those of you that wish to speak about partnership. The form I think that takes is, we've historically put in big teams into organisations to help you. We don't think that's necessarily going to be affordable going forward, but we think that putting fantastic, very high quality super mentors and coaches alongside you as chief execs, we think that's a very, very efficient and very powerful way to help you. Individuals who understand organizational development, commercial strategy and finance, and have worn the shoes of a leader. I think that's really important. All of our people have been chief execs or senior directors, and I think that's going to be absolutely critical going forward, because it's not just about knowing stuff, it's about empathy, and it's about being able to walk directly with you as you approach these huge challenges. So our Don't Bowl Alone message is also our kind of our willingness to engage with you on these big questions, because we think for many of you it's going to be a critical year, and we want to help you to be a success in that time. So if you do want to press restart and you want a kind of completely open and interesting conversation, we'd love to have it, and just call us. You know where we are.